Drawing an animated floating ghost is easier than you think, and I'm going to show you exactly how you can do it, no matter your skill level. Hello wonderful people, it's Genevieve, and my goal here on this channel is to teach you all about illustration and design. So if you're new, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the weekly videos and so that you can join our wonderful creative community. And with that said, grab your drawing tools and let's get started. So we are going to start by creating a new canvas. Now for reference, these are the dimensions of my canvas. It is literally just the size of my iPad screen, but make sure you find something that works for your own project requirements. And if you're not exactly sure how to do that, I have a video in which I teach you everything you need to know in order to pick a canvas size. So I will link that in the description below. But just a quick heads up, since we're creating something that is going to be an animation, we need to make sure that the size is not too large, otherwise we won't be able to export our file as an animation. So make sure that you're staying within 3000 per 3000 pixels, so nothing bigger than that, and then you should be good to go. So once you have your file, we're going to change the color background. So just clicking on the automatically created background layer from Procreate, and then you can pick literally any color you want. If you want to do exactly as I am doing, I created a free palette. You can download it. It will be linked in the description below. So basically, we're going to go with a super dark blue. It could be a dark purple. Any dark color is going to work well for now. We're going to start by creating a super simple background, and then we're going to draw the ghost, and then we're going to animate everything. So we're going to start with just a grass, so rename your layer to grass. And here we can use really any color we want. I'm personally going to stay within the same palette of all the same blue, just different light intensity. So we're going to pick for now the lightest blue or the lightest version of the color you want to use. Now in this video, I'm always going to be suggesting two different kind of brushes. One is going to be a free brush that comes with Procreate, and you're going to be able to follow the tutorial just fine with these brushes, especially for this video. The brushes really don't matter that much. And the other brush is going to be a brush from my Ultimate Illustration bundle, and these brushes are going to allow you to save some time and get more professional results overall. But again, they are not essential. You can still follow along without them. If you want to check them out though, they will be linked in the description below, and there's always a special promo code just for you, the YouTube people. So you can either use in the sketching panel the 6B pencil, which is really nice textured brush, or otherwise if you have the illustration bundle, go ahead and pick the outlines brush. And here all we're going to do is roughly, we're going to draw the part of the illustration which is going to be the grass. So you can draw just a slightly curved line wherever you want it to be in the canvas, and then just fill that section in with the base color. Since we're using a textured brush though, we might need to adjust the threshold of the fill. And to do that, you just keep your pencil on the screen and then move it from left to right, trying to find the moment right before the color starts filling the entire screen, and then that's where you stop. So we're also going to draw some very simple bushes. So go ahead and create a new layer, put it below the grass layer, and rename it to bushes. Now here we're drawing a super simple background. We don't want anything overwhelming. We want the focus to be the ghost. So we're just going to roughly map out the main shapes, but not really adding a lot of details on them. So for this bushes layer, you're going to take a slightly darker version of your main color. So in my case, a slightly darker version of my blue, and just kind of draw these fluffy shapes, so like a sheep shape or like a cloud shape, I'm not exactly sure. Nothing crazy complicated, and then you can fill them in, making sure that you adjust your threshold as necessarily. So you can draw as many or as few bushes as you want, making sure that they are connected below the grass as well, otherwise it's going to fill in your entire canvas when you try to fill them in. And I also like to add some stray little leaves, kind of like this, that are just floating above the bush. I know it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I personally like it, so feel free to add them as well if you want to. Once that is done, we're going to add some trees in the background to fill in the top of the illustration. So go ahead and create a new layer, put it below the bush layer, and then rename this one to trees. So you probably guessed it, we're just going to take a even darker version of our main color. So in my case, a darker version of my blue. Nothing too crazy though, just a slight difference so that we're able to see that it's not, part of the bushes. And these trees are going to be very simple. So you can see here, I'm just starting with mapping out where the trunks are going to be. And I like to draw just two in the background, and then later in the next step, we're going to add more trees in the background of the background, even further in the background, I guess, to really further fill in this area. But for now, we don't want to be overwhelming either, so two bright trees is going to be good enough. And once you know where you want them to be and kind of the rough angle, you can just add some very simple branches like this. Now I know drawing trees can be a little bit intimidating, especially if you're new to illustration, but don't worry, it is not that complicated. Like, I know the branches, it look kind of random, but just think that you're drawing a bunch of Y, like the letter Y, and we all know how to write the letter Y, so we all know how to draw branches. That being said, if it is a little bit too much, that's totally okay. You can copy what I'm doing, that's fine. But I really encourage you, if you feel confident enough, to go ahead and try to draw your own branch configuration. That is really good practice for when you draw your own illustrations. And it is time for the secret password. So if you've watched this final video, please go ahead and comment spooky. It gives me a lot of insight into how to edit and pace my videos better, which helps me create better tutorials for you guys. But the coolest thing about it is it allows us to see who's part of the creative community that we're building here on the channel. Especially for me, you guys know me, you see my face in the intro, you hear my voice throughout the entire video, but I have no idea who you guys are. And whenever you leave a comment, I get to see sometimes your name, sometimes your face. And yeah, it's just really cool to see the wonderful creative community that is here on this channel. So go ahead and leave a comment with the word spooky, and we're gonna keep going. And just like I mentioned earlier, once you're done with your 2 main trees, we're going to add more trees in the background. So create a new layer, put it below the trees layer, and rename this one to more trees. We'll all know where we're talking about. I know it's kind of strange, but you know what? Let's go with it. So this more tree layer, we're going to draw on it with the same brush, but we're going to go with an even darker version of our blue. This time we want it to be quite dark. So we want it to be lighter than the background, but almost the same color as the background. And here we're not even going to bother with the branches, otherwise it's going to make the top of the illustration super busy, which is not what we want. So we're just going to draw some trunks that are going to add a little bit more detail and interest in the background without, again, making it crazy busy. So something like this, you know, 3 trees in the background is, I think, a good number. So we have the main shapes for the background. This was probably the hardest part of this entire video, so congratulations if you made it this far. Now we're just going to add a little bit more texture on the background, just super simple stuff. And we're going to start on the bushes layer. And for that, we're going to color pick the color of the grass. So to color pick in Procreate, you can just hold your finger on the color, or you can go back in the palette and just pick it there. And then with the same brush, you're just going to draw some little dots over the top part of your bushes. So something like that. I would say in groups of 1, 2, or 3 together. As you can see, it's super simple, but it makes it look almost like there are leaves in the bushes as opposed to having just like flat little cloud-like images. So we're also going to color pick the color of the darkest trees and do the same thing. So adding some darker blobs this time, or darker leaves. Again, 1 or 2, 3 in the same group, and then move on to a different area. You don't want to overdo it. You just want to kind of sprinkle them. But this makes a big difference, and it takes like 30 seconds. So once you're done with that, we're also going to add some details on the trees. And for that, we're going to click on the trees layer, and we're going to swipe it with 2 fingers towards the right. And that is going to activate alpha lock. So as you can see here, like that. Now you can also manually activate alpha lock by just tapping on the layer and then clicking alpha lock in the menu. And now whatever we draw on this tree layer is going to stay within the shape of the trees that we created at first. So that's super helpful. So we're going to go back to color picking our lighter blue or lighter version of any color we're using, and we're just going to draw some little totally random lines over the tree. So again, this is going to add a lot of texture and interest without making everything super complicated. Now there's no rule here. I personally like to draw just kind of scribbles, but you could go ahead and draw some more precise patterns if you want. But since this is a background, again, I don't want the main interest to be there anyway, so I don't want to spend too much time on the background. It would just kind of be counterproductive. And once you have the pattern on these trees, we're actually going to move on to the grass. So we're not going to add any pattern on the more trees layer. That would just be too much. So we're going to stick with the same color, and we're going to add some blade of grass on the grass layer. So nothing crazy, just kind of on the edges to make it look a little bit less flat. Just something like this. Great, so at this point we're ready to start drawing the ghost, but we're just going to group all of our layers together because that's super important. So to do that, you can just swipe them towards the right with 1 finger, and then click the group option at the top, and then you can collapse the group just clicking on the arrow, and you can also rename this group to background. So this should be fairly simple and quite fun, honestly. We're going to start by just creating a new layer for the ghost. This one is going to be above the background group, and we're going to rename it to ghost. So on this layer, we're going to draw with pure white. Here I made it in the palette, but it's literally just, you know, pure white. And we're going to stick with the same brush. Honestly, we're going to use it for most of the video, so super easy. And you can draw any kind of shape ghost you want. I like to draw a ghost that has kind of this bell shape for the top and then some little waves on the bottom, I guess. But you could draw a ghost that is a pure bell without the little waves on the bottom. You could draw a ghost that is more like a teardrop shape. Any shape you want. That's totally up to you. Ghosts, I don't judge. They come in all shapes and forms, so draw your own ghost here. Just a little silhouette like this, nothing complicated. And don't agonize too much over the shape of your ghost. You can always use the arrow tool here, setting it to distort, and then using the anchor, like the blue little anchors on the sides, to resize and reshape your ghost. Try not to do it too much though, otherwise you're going to start distorting the pixels and then you're going to lose some quality, but a little bit is enough, mostly when you're trying to go down in size as opposed to up in size. And once you're happy with your ghost, go ahead and create a new layer above that ghost layer, rename this new one to face, and we're going to pick either black or like a dark charcoal. I'm gonna go with dark charcoal. I don't want to have any pure black in my illustrations. I try to avoid that. Personal preference. And you're gonna draw any kind of face you want. So I like to draw a face that has really tiny eyes that are far apart with a tiny cute little mouth, kind of like this. And I'm also going to draw two very simple arms just to make it look like he's kind of cute and blushing or hiding. I don't exactly know, but I just like to have a cute ghost. And to make it even cuter, I'm gonna go in with a kind of grayish pink and draw some spirals for the cheeks. Here you can really draw any facial expression you want, any kind of facial features. You can really have your own ghost. That's really totally up to you. Feel free to experiment. You can even have like an animal shaped ghost. Really, whatever you feel at this point, you can do. We're also going to be creating this kind of effect on the bottom of the ghost, I guess. And for that, we're going to tap on the ghost layer and activate the layer mask. Now, if you're not familiar with masks, just know that they're super helpful in illustration. I have a video in which I go in details about how to use them, so you can check it out. I will link in the description below as well. But for now, just kind of remember that everything we draw on this layer mask in black is going to act as if we're erasing our ghost. It is not actually erasing the ghost, it's just kind of protecting the ghost shape itself, but pretending that we're erasing it. So if you set your paintbrush to black, you're going to be able, as you can see, to kind of erase the shape a little bit. But it is still there. So it's a way to, when you draw an illustration and you like the shape, kind of protect that shape while still being able to make holes in it. And if you draw in white again on this mask, it's going to bring back the color. So roughly paint in black over the bottom part of your ghost to erase it, and then we're going to use the smudge tool, setting it to the stucco brush from the painting panel, and we're just going to roughly kind of blend that erased part, I guess, to create a lot of really nice texture in the bottom. So by doing that, we not only add texture and interest in the illustration, but we also make the bottom of the ghost look transparent, so we're going to see the background and it just looks a little bit more ghostly as opposed to just, you know, a solid white color. We're also going to add a shadow below our ghost, which I know doesn't make a whole lot of sense because a ghost would not cast a shadow, but it's really going to look super good in the animation. So just create a new layer, put it below the ghost layer but above the background group, rename it to shadow. And for that, we're going to color pick the dark color of the tree, or the darkest tree color, and just simply brush kind of an oval shape below the ghost. So here, it really doesn't need to be precise. Actually, if it's textured, it's even better. So I'm personally filling in mine manually as opposed to with the color fill option, because that way you get some of the texture from the brush. And at this point, feel free to play with the opacity until you get something that you like. I'm going to set my opacity around 40%, but that's a personal preference. You can also use the arrow tool, making sure that it is still set to distort to kind of change the shape a little bit, just like we did for the ghost, to make sure that we're really super happy with our shadow. And once we're also going to group these layers, so just swiping them towards the right and then clicking on the group option at the top, collapsing the group and renaming it to ghost. So for the animation part, not the illustration animation, that made no sense. For the animation part, that is really important that we group our layers like this, so make sure you don't forget to do that. Once that is done, we're going to create a new layer above everything. We're going to rename this one to vignette, and we're going to set the blending mode to linear burn. For now, we're going to leave the opacity around, I don't know, 50% or something like that. but we can tweak it later as usual. And with the same color, so the dark tree color, we're going to draw kind of this, like we're basically going to shade the corners of our illustration. So we're going to create this kind of circle around our ghost, and we're going to go back to the smudge tool set to the same brush, so the stucco brush, and we're just going to blend these corners in a little bit, which is going to create the vignette effect. It just helps bring the eye towards the center of the illustration, so it really focuses everything towards the ghost. Okay, so now to the really fun part of animating everything. It's going to be fairly simple, but first we need to activate the animation assist. So go in the wrench icon menu at the top, click on canvas, and then turn on animation assist. It's probably going to make everything look super weird, but don't worry, that's totally fine. So you're going to see at the bottom of your screen, you're going to have this kind of timeline with a bunch of different images. So we're going to start by setting our background as, well, the background. And if you're not able to set it to background, it might be because there is another layer between your background color and your background group. So make sure that your background group is really the first layer after your background color. We're also going to set the vignette, which is going to be kind of this dark frame, as the foreground. And again, if you're not able to set it as the foreground, it might be because there's another layer above it in your layer panel. So make sure that the vignette is the very first layer on top of everything. So now if we click play, we see that nothing moves, and that's because the background was going to stay fixed. The foreground is going to stay fixed. So the only thing is going to move at this point is going to be the ghost. So if we open the settings, we see a bunch of options. The first three here are just the order in which the frames are going to play. So loop is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, while ping pong is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. So instead of jumping back to the first frame, it's just going kind of back and forth through them. Now, one shot is just going to play the animation once, so we don't want that. For the ghost, since we want it to be floating, we're going to pick ping pong. Now, the other options, frame per second, this is kind of a bit more complicated. For now, just think of it as the speed of the animation. This is not necessarily the truth, but we're just going to go with that from now. So we're going to set it around 5. It doesn't matter, we can tweak it later. Now, onion skin frame and onion skin opacity doesn't affect the final results, it's just a preview while you are working on the animation. I personally like to set onion skin frame at 2, and then onion skin opacity, you can set it to whatever you want, and we're going to leave the other 2 options unchecked for now. So the way to make our ghost move is going to be to create multiple frames. So think of a frame as a page of a flipbook. So you're just going to go kind of moving from one frame to the other. Now, since we want to have the same ghost that is just in a different position, what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate our ghost group by swiping it towards the left and then clicking the duplicate option. So now we have a copy of our ghost. If we open up the group, we're going to select the ghost layer as well as the face, making sure that the shadow is not selected. We can now go ahead and use the arrow tool, setting it to uniform to make sure that we don't change the size of the ghost, and activating magnetics in the settings at the bottom, so in the snapping option. And that way we can go ahead and lift up the ghost just a tiny little bit. And you're going to see you're going to have a vertical guide that shows up on the side of your image that is going to show you if you're lifting it, perfectly right above. We're also going to select the shadow, going back to the arrow tool, and this time we're going to make this shadow a little bit smaller. So making sure that you're still at uniform, and then you're going to recenter the shadow. And that's very important because when an object is getting further away from the ground, the shadow from this object may become smaller. So that's what we're doing here. If we click play, we can see that now the animation is bouncing between the 2 frames that we have, and it looks like the ghost is floating already. To make this animation a little bit more interesting, I personally like to add another copy of the ghost so that we have 3 frames to move from. So just creating a duplicate of the latest ghost group that we created. And again, going back, selecting the face and the ghost layers, going back to the arrow tool. This time I'm going to lift the ghost just a little bit, but really not quite as much as the first time. So like half the distance, I guess. And again, making sure that is perfectly lifted right above, not in any kind of diagonal or sideways, just a little bit above the second copy. And we're also going to slightly change the size of the shadow again because the ghost is getting further away from the ground. And this is a little bit advanced as animation theory, But the reason we're doing this move as a smaller difference between the two different positions of the ghost is basically we're effectively slowing down the animation. So between the first two ghosts, there's a big gap, and between the second two, there's a smaller gap, which means it's a smaller range of movement, which is going to slow down the animation. Again, if you don't understand that, that's totally okay. But it adds a little bit, as you can see, it has more fluidity in the movement, having these 3 frames as opposed to just having 1. You can also go back to the settings and change the frame per second so you get a speed that you like. Here, I'm going to go with 3. And if you're a pro animator, well, first of all, I'm not exactly sure why you're watching this intro to animation, but welcome to the channel. If you're a pro animator, don't get mad at me. I know frame per second, that's not exactly what it is, but for this tutorial, that's what we're going to call it. Now, if we want to export our animation, for example, for Instagram, we need the length of the animation to be at least 3 seconds. So for that, we're going to have to duplicate our ghost layers. And just in order to not be confused, we're going to rename them to Ghost 1, Ghost 2, and Ghost 3. And once that is done, we're going to be able to duplicate these layers as many times as we need in order to fill at least 3 seconds. So here you might have to do a little bit of math. Basically, we know that here, for my example at least, we have 3 frames per second. And we have Ghost 1, Ghost 2, Ghost 3, so 3 frames, which means we have 1 second of content. So in order to get 3 seconds, we just need to duplicate everything in order to have a total of 9 ghost layers. So you just need to calculate that for your own animation. So you just take the frame per second and you multiply it by the length of the video and second that you need, and that's going to give you how many frames you need to create. And at that point, all you need to do is duplicate your ghost layers and then reorganize them so it goes from Ghost 1, Ghost 3, Ghost 1, Ghost 3, Ghost 1, Ghost 3 in order in your list, just like this. So in my case, I'm going to end up having 9 ghosts that are just pretty much the same 3 groups but duplicated multiple times. And once you're ready to export your animation, just go in the wrench icon menu at the top, select Share, and then Animated MP4 towards the bottom. Here, make sure that the frame per second option matches what you had in your settings, and then click Export. You're then going to have the option of where to save your image. Go ahead and pick Save Video, which is going to save this animation video in your camera roll, so where you have your regular pictures and videos on your iPad. And from there, your animation just becomes a regular video that you can use to post wherever you want. And if you want to learn how to draw more illustrations that are themed around Halloween and fall, I highly recommend you check out this playlist in which I'm going to teach you exactly that. But before you leave, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the weekly videos. Then click on the link right here and I'll meet you there.